After confronting Darth Maul on Tatooine, Qui-Gon in an agile leap entered Queen Padme's ship, followed closely by Obi-Wan. The Jedi Master observed young Anakin Skywalker sitting in a corner of the cabin, his eyes still shining with adrenaline from the recent battle. Qui-Gon knelt beside the boy and said gently, "Anakin, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, my Padawan." The boy looked at the young Jedi with evident curiosity and asked innocently, "Are you a Jedi too?" Obi-Wan smiled and confirmed with a nod, while Qui-Gon laughed at the boy's spontaneity. The tension from the battle began to dissipate, giving way to a moment of unexpected lightness. Exhausted from the long journey and intense confrontation with the Sith Lord, both master and apprentice leaned against the cold wall of the ship. Qui-Gon closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his decisions about Anakin. Obi-Wan watched the boy who had quickly fallen asleep, his peaceful breathing contrasting with the chaos they had just faced. The Padawan wondered about the future of this child that his master believed to be the chosen one. Gradually, fatigue took hold of both Jedis, and their eyelids grew heavy until they too fell into a deep sleep. The ship continued its course through hyperspace while its passengers rested. When Qui-Gon opened his eyes again, something was completely different. He was no longer on the ship, but rather on an ethereal walkway that extended infinitely in all directions. Mystical lights danced around, and glowing portals floated in the cosmic void. Beside him, Obi-Wan was also awakening, his eyes wide with confusion. "Master, this doesn't seem like a dream," said the Padawan, his voice echoing strangely in that place. Qui-Gon touched the surface of the walkway, feeling its solidity. "Indeed, it doesn't seem like a dream," he agreed, his intuition telling him they were somewhere connected to the Force itself. Although they didn't know it, their consciousnesses had been transported to the legendary world between worlds. The two Jedis began to walk cautiously along the walkway, drawn to one of the luminous portals. Qui-Gon extended his hand and gently touched the glowing surface, which rippled like water. Immediately, images began to form before them, showing events from past times. They saw the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, great battles between Jedi and Sith throughout the millennia. "The Force is showing us something important," murmured Qui-Gon, his voice laden with reverence. Obi-Wan watched fascinated as the visions succeeded each other, showing the distant past and then more recent events. They saw their own arrival on Tatooine, the meeting with Anakin, all the moments they had lived in recent days. Then the images changed again, and this time showed events that had not yet happened. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan saw young Anakin grown, being trained by Obi-Wan in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The Jedi Master felt a tightness in his chest as he noticed his absence in that vision. "Why am I not there?" he asked aloud, although he knew there was no one to answer. Obi-Wan placed a hand on his master's shoulder and said gravely, "Perhaps this means you won't be with us anymore, Master." The implication was clear and somber. Qui-Gon shook his head, trying to push the thought away, but knew that the Force rarely showed visions without purpose. The visions continued to unfold like a hologram of Anakin's future life. They saw him becoming a promising young man, his lightsaber skills surpassing even the most experienced masters. "He is extraordinary," whispered Obi-Wan, admiration and concern mixed in his voice. Qui-Gon nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the images that continued to change. They saw Anakin reuniting with Padme Amidala, now a beautiful senator, and love blossoming between them. They saw the secret wedding, the happiness in the young Jedi's eyes. For a moment, it seemed that everything would be well, that the boy would have a life of fulfillment. But then the visions darkened, and a chill ran through both Jedis as they sensed that something terrible was about to be revealed. The images that followed were of pure horror. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan saw Anakin, now a grown man, with the golden eyes of dark side corruption. He marched through the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, his blue lightsaber cutting through everything in his path. Young Padawans tried to flee, but there was no mercy. "No, it can't be," Obi-Wan murmured, his voice breaking with anguish. Qui-Gon was paralyzed, unable to look away from what the boy he had discovered was causing. The screams echoed through the portal, and tears began to roll down the Jedi Master's face. This could not be the vision of the Chosen One who would bring balance to the Force. The vision changed to a volcanic planet, where Anakin faced Obi-Wan in a duel that seemed destined to happen from the beginning. The flames of Mustafar illuminated their faces as master and apprentice faced each other with devastating fury. "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you," shouted Obi-Wan in the vision, his voice laden with unbearable pain. The Obi-Wan watching the scene felt his legs weaken, and he had to lean on Qui-Gon. The fight ended with Anakin defeated, his body consumed by flames. But the vision didn't stop there. They saw Emperor Palpatine rebuilding Anakin as a machine, a terrifying black armor that breathed with a mechanical and sinister sound. The being that emerged from that transformation was no longer Anakin Skywalker, it was Darth Vader. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan watched horrified as this dark warrior crushed the Jedi resistance across the galaxy. Entire planets fell under the rule of the Galactic Empire, and Vader was the executioner's hand of this tyranny. "He is the Chosen One," said Qui-Gon, his voice barely more than a whisper. "He should bring balance to the Force, not destroy it." Obi-Wan couldn't respond, his heart broken by the betrayal that hadn't even happened yet. The visions finally began to fade, and the world between worlds began to dissolve around them. Suddenly, both Jedis awoke startled, their foreheads covered in cold sweat. Anakin was standing before them, his childish voice calling them enthusiastically, "Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, we're arriving at Coruscant." The boy had no idea what they had just witnessed. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan looked at each other, and in that moment, without needing to say a single word, both knew the truth. It had not been just a dream or a common illusion. The Force had shown them the future, a dark and terrible future that needed to be avoided at any cost. The weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. The ship landed in the Coruscant hangar, where they were received by Supreme Chancellor Palpatine with his political smile and honeyed words. But Qui-Gon barely paid attention to the formalities. He exchanged another significant look with Obi-Wan, and both discreetly withdrew from the group. "We need to talk," said the Jedi Master, his voice low and urgent. Obi-Wan nodded, and they found a private room far from curious ears. As soon as the door closed, Qui-Gon began, "Obi-Wan, you know what we saw. The Force showed us that for a reason." The Padawan was visibly shaken, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to process everything. "Master, the Force is giving us a chance to change the future," said Qui-Gon, trying to find hope in that desperate situation. But Obi-Wan shook his head vigorously. "No, Master, you don't understand? That boy cannot be trained. I can't believe you're still considering this after what we saw." His voice began to rise, emotion taking over. "He will kill the Jedi Order. He will destroy the Republic. Everything we saw will prove that training Anakin Skywalker is the greatest mistake we could make." Qui-Gon tried to argue, but Obi-Wan was unwavering. The discussion between master and apprentice intensified, each firm in his position about the fate of the boy waiting outside. The discussion culminated with Obi-Wan making a decision that would change everything, a choice he believed was his only option. "I will report this to the Council," he declared, his jaw set with unwavering determination. Qui-Gon tried to stop him, placing a firm hand on his arm and pulling him back. "Obi-Wan, wait, we can find another way. We can meditate on this, seek guidance from the Force together." But the Padawan had already decided. His mind made up and his heart hardened by fear of what he had witnessed. He freed himself from Qui-Gon's grip and walked directly to the Jedi Council chamber, his steps echoing through the temple corridors. When he arrived before the assembled masters, he reported every detail of the vision they had shared, omitting nothing, from the ethereal walkway to the horrors of the temple in flames. Master Yoda closed his eyes, sensing through the Force the truth in the young man's words, the disturbance those visions had caused in the fabric of reality. "Grave, this is shown something important the Force has. Ignore, we cannot," said the Grand Master, his voice laden with centuries of wisdom. Master Windu crossed his arms over his chest and declared with authority, Then it is decided. The boy will not be trained. Too dangerous he is. The other masters agreed one by one, including Plo Koon, who shook his head with regret, and Ki-Adi-Mundi, who closed his eyes in acceptance of the inevitable decision. Qui-Gon Jinn knew that the Council had sealed Anakin's fate with that decision. He felt the Force pulsing within him, guiding him to a radical decision that went against everything he had been taught about obedience to the Order. That same night, he took the sleeping boy from the quarters that had been assigned to him and discreetly left the temple through the less guarded passages. Anakin awoke confused as they boarded a small transport ship that Qui-Gon had prepared. "Qui-Gon, where are we going? What about Queen Padme? What about the other Jedis?" asked the boy, rubbing his sleepy eyes and looking around with confusion. "To a safe place, where you can learn about the Force properly," replied the Jedi, programming the coordinates for Sereno on a console that glowed softly in the darkness of the cabin. It was an immense risk that could cost him his position in the Order, but Qui-Gon believed that abandoning the boy would be an even greater mistake, a betrayal of everything the Force represented. If the Force had shown that vision, it was so he could change the course of events, not to give up on Anakin at the first sign of danger. In Sereno, they were received by Count Dooku, Qui-Gon's former master, a noble man with an imposing presence and penetrating eyes. The former Jedi welcomed them into his elegant palace, filled with art and treasures from thousands of worlds. But his expression was one of deep concern when he heard about the unexpected arrival. "Qui-Gon, you fled from the Council? This is desertion, something I never thought you would do," said Dooku, serving aromatic tea to his former Padawan in fine porcelain cups. Qui-Gon explained everything with a tired voice: the vision of the world between worlds, the fear that had consumed Obi-Wan, the Council's inflexible refusal to even consider alternatives. Dooku listened attentively, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table as he processed each word. Then he said firmly, "The Council is right, Qui-Gon. The boy should not be trained if the visions are so clear about the danger he represents. You are allowing your emotion to cloud your judgment." But Qui-Gon was insistent, reminding Dooku of the principles he himself had taught about following the will of the Force above rules and regulations. He appealed to the ancient connection between master and apprentice, to the bonds that still united them. Reluctantly, Dooku agreed to shelter them in Sereno, although he maintained deep reservations about the wisdom of that decision. Meanwhile, in Coruscant, the Council had discovered the disappearance when the temple guards reported that Qui-Gon and the boy had departed during the night. Obi-Wan was called before the Council again, this time facing stern looks from the assembled masters. He had to admit shamefully that he didn't know where his master had taken Anakin, that Qui-Gon had not shared his plans with him. "Failure yours. This was," said Yoda, although his voice carried no anger, only deep sadness. "But find them now we must." Master Windu determined with authority. "Find them, you must, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Bring them back to the temple. Your mission is, use all necessary resources." Obi-Wan departed immediately, tracking clues across the galaxy with tireless determination. He checked Naboo first, asking Padme if she had heard anything. Then Tatooine, interrogating acquaintances that Qui-Gon might have, all the places he could imagine where his master might seek refuge. But Qui-Gon had been extremely careful in covering his tracks, erasing flight records and using false identities. Weeks turned into frustrating months, and there was no sign of the renegade master and his young pupil. The Clone Wars were beginning to unfold, and eventually, the Council decided that other more urgent matters needed attention, especially with growing rumors of a Sith conspiracy that threatened the Republic. The search for Qui-Gon and Anakin was archived, though never completely forgotten, always a shadow in the Master's minds. In Sereno, far from the watchful eyes of the Jedi Order and hidden in the vast grounds of Dooku's palace, Anakin Skywalker grew under the dedicated tutelage of Qui-Gon Jinn. The training was intense but balanced, focused not only on combat techniques but also on philosophy and emotional control. Qui-Gon focused especially on teaching the boy about control of emotions and the nature of the living force that flowed through all things. The force flows through all living things, Anakin, from the smallest creature to the largest ancient trees. explained the master as they meditated in Dooku's lush gardens, surrounded by exotic plants from hundreds of worlds. You must learn to hear its gentle voice, not let your emotions control you like an uncontrolled storm. Anakin absorbed each lesson with a fierce dedication that impressed even Qui-Gon, his young mind like a sponge absorbing knowledge. At 15, he had become extraordinarily skilled for his age. His connection with the Force was deeper than any Padawan his age at the temple, his abilities growing exponentially. Dooku frequently observed the training sessions from a high balcony, impressed but still concerned about the young man's almost unlimited potential, seeing in him something that made him uneasy. But the relative peace of Sereno would not last forever, for dark forces moved in the shadows. Emperor Palpatine, who had worked in the shadows during all those years orchestrating the Clone Wars, had finally discovered Anakin's location through his vast network of spies and informants. He sent his Sith apprentice, Darth Maul, who had survived the confrontation on Naboo through pure hatred, with a specific and clear mission: eliminate Qui-Gon Jinn permanently and bring the boy to the dark side, where his power could be truly utilized. One moonless night, while Qui-Gon meditated alone on the palace terrace under the distant stars, Maul attacked from the shadows with superhuman speed and ferocity. The confrontation was brutal and quick, lightsabers cutting through the night air with red and blue brilliance. Despite all his considerable skill and years of experience, Qui-Gon was caught by surprise by the speed and aggressiveness of the attack. The Sith's red double blade pierced through the Jedi in a moment of fatal carelessness, and Qui-Gon fell to his knees, feeling his life force draining quickly. Anakin, who had learned to sense disturbances in the Force with incredible precision, ran to the terrace only to arrive in time to see his master fall. "No!" the young man shouted in agony, running to hold Qui-Gon while Maul escaped into the darkness, laughing cruelly. With his last whispered words, Qui-Gon grabbed Anakin's hand. "Don't let hatred consume you, Anakin. Remember everything I taught about balance and control. Promise me." And then, with one last peaceful breath, the Jedi Master became one with the Force, his body fading into light. The pain of loss was unbearable for Anakin, tearing through him like a hot blade. He held Qui-Gon's body until the last moment, tears running freely down his face as he sobbed uncontrollably. Dooku arrived moments later, alerted by servants who had heard the confrontation, and placed a heavy hand on the young man's trembling shoulder. "Anakin, I will finish your training," offered the Count, his voice laden with an emotion he rarely showed anyone. "Qui-Gon would have wished for you to complete your education in the Jedi arts." The young man looked at him with eyes red and swollen from crying and nodded silently, without words to express his pain. What Anakin didn't know was that Dooku had been secretly corrupted by Palpatine during the war years, becoming the Sith Lord Darth Tyrannus through promises of power and order in the galaxy. During the following years that seemed endless, Dooku trained Anakin not only in the ways of light that Qui-Gon had begun, but also began to subtly introduce the teachings of the dark side, planting seeds of power and revenge. To avenge Qui-Gon, you will need all possible power, not just what the restrictive Jedis allow, whispered Dooku during their intensive training sessions, his words like sweet poison. The dark side offers strength that light alone can never provide. Anakin, consumed by the thirst for revenge and the memory of Maul's cruel laughter, did not refuse these dark teachings, believing they were necessary to achieve his goal. At 21, Anakin Skywalker had become something unique and unprecedented in the galaxy, an anomaly that defied categorization. He mastered both the techniques of light that Qui-Gon had taught with patience and the dark powers that Dooku had shared with calculated intent. His strength was unparalleled and terrifying, surpassing any Jedi or Sith that had ever existed in all recorded history. He could sense presences across entire star systems as if they were beside him, move massive objects with a simple focused thought, and his skill with the lightsaber was simply supernatural and impossible to combat. "You're ready," Dooku finally declared on a gray morning, watching Anakin complete an impossible training sequence. "Darth Maul won't be able to escape you now. He won't stand a chance against what you've become." Anakin left Sereno in his own modified ship, equipped with the best tracking systems, determined to find his master's killer wherever he was hiding. Dooku kept secret Anakin's exact location from Palpatine for some time, knowing the young man was too powerful to be easily controlled and fearing his own master's reactions. He still had a remnant of loyalty to his former Padawan son, a last spark of light fighting against the darkness. The hunt for Darth Maul took Anakin through the Outer Rim for endless months, following fragmented rumors and whispers about a warrior with distinctive red tattoos who worked for criminal organizations. He interrogated informants, raided gang hideouts, followed every clue no matter how small. Finally, he found Maul on an abandoned space station near Dathomir, the Sith's home planet, a structure floating in the void of space. Maul fought with everything he had, using all his rage and experience, but it wasn't enough. With a final and devastating movement that Qui-Gon would never have approved, Anakin disarmed Maul and his blade pierced through the Sith's chest. "This is for Qui-Gon Jinn," said Anakin with an icy and emotionless voice, as Maul fell to the cold floor, his yellow eyes finally going out. But victory brought only a profound emptiness within Anakin, a hole that revenge couldn't fill. Maul's death didn't bring Qui-Gon back nor ease the pain in his heart. As he meditated over Maul's body in the silent station, trying to feel some satisfaction that wouldn't come, he realized something was wrong on Tatooine. His mother, Shmi Skywalker, whom he hadn't seen in over a decade, had been kidnapped by Tusken raiders who attacked the moisture farms. Anakin rushed back to the desert planet of his childhood. But when he finally found her in the Tusken camp, it was too late. She died in his arms under the two moons, her last words being about how proud she was of the man he had become. Something inside him broke again, a deep fissure in his soul. In his rage and pain, he eliminated the entire Tusken camp, sparing no one. Lost and alone in the desert, covered in blood and regret, Anakin Skywalker decided to seek the only family he still knew, the Jedis who had rejected him years ago. He traveled to Coruscant with hesitation and requested an audience with the High Council, not knowing if he would be accepted or arrested. When he entered the circular chamber bathed in light, he saw faces both familiar and strange, but one in particular made him pause completely. Obi-Wan Kenobi was there, now a respected Jedi Master with longer hair and a well-groomed beard, and his eyes widened as he instantly recognized Anakin. "You," whispered Obi-Wan, memories of the vision from the world between worlds flooding his mind like a flood, each terrible image returning with crystal clarity. The young man before them was the same one from the vision, now grown and powerful. Anakin bowed respectfully before the council with genuine humility. "Masters, I came to confess my complete story and offer my services to the Republic if there is still a place for me," he said with a firm voice but laden with emotion. He told everything without omitting anything. The training with Qui-Gon and Sereno, the peaceful years learning about the Force, the teachings later shared by Dooku that he now questioned, the brutal death of his master at Maul's hands, his hunt and revenge, the devastating loss of his mother and what he had done in response. When he finished his confession, heavy silence filled the chamber like thick fog. Master Yoda looked deeply at Anakin with ancient eyes that had seen centuries of history and said gravely, "Very strong in the Force you are, young Skywalker, but a dangerous path you have walked. Darkness in you I sense." Obi-Wan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and declared in a loud voice, "He is the destruction that was prophesied. We cannot trust him. You don't understand what I saw." The debate in the council was intense and prolonged, lasting hours as they discussed Anakin's fate. Master Windu argued with his deep voice. "He was trained outside our supervision, incorporating teachings we don't approve of and cannot verify. How do we know he's not here as an agent of the dark side?" Plo Koon, always the most compassionate, added, "But he came to us voluntarily, confessing his errors. That must count for something, demonstrates character." Ki-Adi-Mundi pondered carefully. "The fundamental question is, can we risk trusting him when the visions were so clear about the danger? Or would we be fulfilling the prophecy by rejecting him?" Anakin remained standing in the center of the chamber, feeling the crushing weight of his past decisions while his fate was debated as if he weren't present. Finally, after what seemed like endless hours, Yoda raised his small and wrinkled hand to silence everyone. Decided it is. For your own protection and everyone's rejected, your offer is, leave Coruscant, you must. Monitored, you will be. The rejection cut Anakin deeply, but he simply nodded with dignity and withdrew from the chamber without arguing. Obi-Wan watched the young man leave, part of him relieved by the decision, part of him wondering if they had made a terrible mistake that would only fulfill the prophecy they were trying to avoid. Anakin left the Jedi Temple with a heavy heart, but didn't leave Coruscant immediately. By fate or the will of the Force, he reunited with Padme Amidala, now an influential senator, at a diplomatic reception. The recognition between them was instant and profound, and conversations led to meetings. Meetings led to a relationship that blossomed quickly. Unlike the visions that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan had witnessed, there was no secret or shame. Anakin was free, not bound by the Jedi codes, and when they married in a simple but beautiful ceremony in Naboo, everyone knew and celebrated. Anakin finally found peace in Padme's arms, building a life away from war and politics. They settled in Naboo, where Padme continued her work as senator and Anakin dedicated himself to helping the common people of the planet. When Padme became pregnant with twins, Anakin swore he would be the father he never had, that he would protect his family above all. But peace would be tested when Palpatine, through Dooku, tried to bring Anakin to his side, offering power and purpose. Anakin went to the Supreme Chancellor to confront him personally, completely rejecting his dark proposal. You are deceiving everyone, manipulating the clone wars for your own gain, accused Anakin, his voice laden with conviction. I fear you will become a dictator, and I won't allow you to threaten Naboo, won't threaten my family. He declared he would denounce Palpatine to the Senate and the Jedi Council. Dooku, present in the room, stood against Anakin upon realizing the extent of his apprentice's betrayal to Palpatine. Palpatine, his political mask finally falling to reveal the Sith beneath, said coldly, "Then you won't leave that room alive," and ordered Dooku to kill Anakin. But Dooku, remembering Qui-Gon and the years training Anakin, refused to fight against the young man, turning his blade against Palpatine in a last attempt at redemption. Palpatine, with devastating Sith power, faced and eliminated Dooku quickly, his former apprentice falling at his feet. Anakin then faced the Dark Emperor in a duel that was worth the balance of the Force. The battle was epic, Force lightning colliding against impossible defenses, but finally, using both light and darkness in perfect balance as Qui-Gon had begun to teach, Anakin defeated and eliminated Palpatine, bringing an end to the Sith threat. Afterward, he went to the council with complete evidence, telling everything about the conspiracy. Anakin was invited to become a master of the Jedi Order, an extraordinary recognition, but he gently declined. My place is with my family in Naboo, he said, but always call me when you need help. I will be there. Years later, his son Luke became his apprentice, learning about the Force and balance, while his daughter Leia became a brilliant senator of Naboo, following in her mother's footsteps. Qui-Gon Jinn was right after all, even in death. Anakin could follow another path, a path of light and family, proving that the future is never written in stone and that choices matter more than prophecies.